traditional financial literacy programs are problematic because of the inherent assumptions. They believe that two things. They believe willpower is the issue, maybe three things. Willpower is the issue. The problem is that we don't know enough. And they assume that we have money to begin with. And so when you know things about when you're financially literate and you still struggle with your money, then you can end up feeling shame. When you don't have money in this culture, you can end up feeling shame. And when you know what to do and you still do things different from what you know what to do, because it isn't a question of willpower, there's more at play, then you'll also feel shame. Because it's traditional financial literacy is just do this. And anybody you go to financial literacy education will give you the same basic information. And it's simple, just do it, right? But except it's not that simple. Another aspect of the dilemma with traditional financial literacy education is who's giving the education to whom. And it's often folks in a position of privilege and power who have more money relative to those to whom they are giving the education. And they hold themselves out as the ultimate outcome, as the example that if you just follow my path, you will end up here. And there's a lot of things that contributed to them being where they are. It's very complicated what leads to financial success. And there are many, many barriers. And so when we compare ourselves, you know, the so-called financially illiterate person or the learner of financial literacy to the person who's delivering it to us, and we tell ourselves, well, if I just follow these steps, they'll be there, I'll be there, and follow those steps and I'm still not there, or I can't follow those steps, then I come up short. And again, that's a source of shame. So there are a lot of systemic issues at play that make it difficult for folks to follow traditional financial literacy. Like in my research, writing this blog post, I found a number of simple so-called rules to live by: budget your money, have an emergency fund, eliminate high interest debt, put your savings first, spend less than you make, and don't rely on credit cards, and also save for retirement. But like, if you stop to think, I mean, it's like, duh, obviously save. Duh, obviously don't get in debt. Duh, obviously don't run up your credit card. And if you're not paid enough and there are systemic issues around how much people get paid, then how are you supposed to save when your housing your housing requirements for money and your food requirements outstrip the money coming in for you? And this is the case as much for a woman business owner as it is for a person who's earning a wage. We know, I don't know the statistic, but you'll pop it in, that women entrepreneurs don't earn significantly less than their male counterparts, and that we experience many more barriers in accessing cash and cash flow and funding. So again, we come up short in terms of the cash available to us to be able to implement any one of these simple so-called steps towards financial abundance. So wage disparity is one thing, but there's also the social and economic conditions under which people live and the barriers, social and economic barriers that they face. Again, we look at some of the Indigenous entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of color, Black Canadian entrepreneurs who encounter incredible barriers to business success because of the lack of access to the supports that any cishet white man in North America has access. And so we can't apply those rules to us. We can't apply the traditional business rules, and we can't apply the traditional financial planning rules either, because our situations are different. And those traditional things are a prescription of steps that's one size fits all, but we're not one size. Like when we have aspirations to a career, but we live in a family whose nobody has ever been to university. Mm-hmm. So it's not even within the realm of possibility for you that you might go. Or if you think you might like to go, but everybody says, well, there's no way you could ever go because nobody's ever gone, then you don't have the opportunity to think creatively about how maybe I might access it. There are so many systemic, same with entrepreneurships. entrepreneurship. If nobody in your family's ever owned a business, right? How do you know where to start even? Well, especially for the CanWCC community, which is women and non-binary folks, it comes back to the standard that's held up to us about what financial success or what business success looks like. And we only have to look at Galen Weston and the other big 3 food corporations in Canada and how they're held out as an example of moneymakers, right? Or any other big corporate person. And we compare ourselves to them and we come up short. And right away, the comparison brings up shame. But also, when we're having a business, like ultimately, we want to be able to earn money in our business. And when we don't earn money in our businesses, again, it's a question of not measuring up to some standard that we have. And when we're struggling or having a hard time, like entrepreneurship or owning a business is glorified. Oh, you're your own boss, you're making all kinds of money, you can do what you want, but the reality is so different. And when we compare ourselves again to the myth and come up short, and we don't have a way to think critically about that myth around money and business and financial success and what it means to be financially successful, and it doesn't fit for us, we don't have any way of knowing that we're okay. Although I have to say, within the CanWCC community, being surrounded by peers whose circumstances are more like mine, then I experience a sense of validation because I see myself and my experience reflected in that of the people around me, the women and non-binary folks who are in that community, and I find that very helpful. In capitalism is not only an economic system, it's a philosophy that permeates North American culture. And money in this culture is tied to worth and survival. And so under capitalism, our worth and survival is under attack on the daily. And so that's very stressful and can be traumatizing for folks. If you've had a traumatic experience in your childhood, that has an impact on how you see your world or the world and the beliefs that you have about people, money, all those kinds of things, safety and danger. And then if you've ever had a financial trauma, that is to say, a trauma directly related to money, you're going to have an emotional response because of those traumatic experiences. So we have 3 potentially traumatizing ways that come in to have an impact on all our business decisions, because as humans, our life experience affects everything we do, both negatively and positively, but we bring our whole selves to our businesses. And so I've taken the Trauma of Money program, which I highly recommend. It's founded by Chantel Chapman. She's a Canadian in Vancouver. And so I'm a certified trauma of money facilitator and on the faculty of the program as well. And in the Trauma of Money program, we talk about increasing discernment and decreasing shame. And so one of the first questions we ask, both in the Trauma of Money program and in my work with entrepreneurs and their money, healing their relationship with money, is whose shame is this? And that's how we address the systemic and inherited trauma aspect, or actually there are 5 aspects of trauma: intergenerational, social, interpersonal. I forget the whole 5, but we inquire into whose shame is this. So intergenerationally, for example, your whole family may have been in poverty for many generations. And for entrepreneurs who are the first people to succeed and have wealth, they may feel shame, like they're betraying their family. And it's not a bad thing or a good thing. It's something to navigate. But when you know, oh, wait a minute, it's not that money's the problem or being wealthy is the problem. I'm having shame because of my concern for belonging and care with my family. And how can I care for and nurture belonging with my family without giving up my wealth? That's a step in the direction of increasing discernment and decreasing shame. Systemically, when a business fails to thrive, right, a person will say, well, my business isn't thriving because I'm a crap business owner, like I don't know enough about business. And we can say, well, let's be curious about what are all the factors in here. And some of them may be, for example, in my situation, I had a business that, brick and mortar business that didn't thrive the way I wanted it to. And I left that business because I wasn't aware of the function of debt in business. And from my childhood and my adult upbringing, I was afraid to take on debt. And that fear prevented me from doing that, right? The fear comes from my past experience, and it needs some care in order for me to open the path to the possibility of leveraging debt in business like I could have. But here I am thinking I'm a crap business owner because my business failed to thrive because of the systems and what I learned as a woman around debt and money, which is be small, spend less, don't buy the makeup, don't have the coffee at Starbucks, instead of how can you earn more, be bigger, do more, right? And so discerning like what are the systemic impacts on my business and its so-called failure to thrive helps me understand it's complex and it's more than just me. So that's an example. I don't tell client stories because of confidentiality. But I tell my story because it represents the experiences of many of the entrepreneurs I've worked with. That's an example of how a systemic, we increase discernment. And when I understand, oh, it's not my fault, it's complex, it's not only me, there are many factors, then my shame decreases. The antidote to shame is connection, caring, and empathy. And there's a saying from the 12-step programs, we're only as sick as our secrets. And the belief is that when we can share with someone, we are less sick or more well. And this applies to any shame. But since we're talking about money, it's true that what we have to hide and have to work to hide weighs on us and makes it worse, more intense for us. And when we can receive the missing experience that we didn't get around money previously in our lives, so we share the thing we think is shameful and we are met with, oh, that must have been so hard. Oh, well, of course that's what you did because look what you were going through. It was the best you could do under the circumstances. Or, oh, I've been there. I feel you. That is the sense of connection and belonging that is the antidote to shame, because at the root of shame is this fear of not belonging, of being judged and ostracized, which is painful in its own, but is a very primal survival fear, because when we don't belong in a community, from way back, we would die. As a child, if we didn't have the belonging and care of our parents, we died. And so we always have this sense of like fear around belonging and acceptance. And so when we can get that reparative response from someone else, as you say, it's like, oh, there's nothing really the matter with me. Other people are going through this too. So there are a number of ways to care for money shame. And I have to say, first of all, that shame is just so very hard to handle on your own. It's such an intense emotion that I can show you these, I can point the way, and you might find it easier to do with someone, which is to say that if you try this and it doesn't work for you, there's nothing wrong with you. It's really hard to do on your own. So the first thing is to have an awareness. Oh, like I'm having a shame attack. Oh, I'm feeling ashamed. To name it. To be like, oh, this is what's happening. And then the second step is to say, whose shame is this? To be discerning around what's all at play here. Then it's a moment of connection with someone else or with ourselves. I talked about, sharing a shame with another person and hearing them say, well, no wonder, of course. You can say the same thing to yourself. Well, no wonder you're feeling shame. This really matters to you. Or no wonder you're feeling shame. You're really wanting belonging. Belonging matters, and you're afraid about that. And then the next step is to take some further action. You can decide what is going to provide that missing experience. So you've given yourself a little bit of that, but you can also reach out to someone who's a safe supporter and get that further support. And then a fifth step that's further along down the road is once you've accompanied your shame and cared for it, then it means more of your cognitive resources can be directed toward taking action. And so you can also be curious, like, what's the situation? And are there any concrete actions that I can take to address if there are any problems? So I'm trying to think of an example. So to come back to the example that I gave before about my fears around debt and how those fears prevented me from taking on debt as a lever in one of my previous businesses. Once I had cared for the shame that I felt around that business's failure to thrive, what I might have done and understood the fear that was at play, what I might have done is reached out to somebody in the CanWCC community who could have mentored me around debt and using debt as a lever and alternative sources of funding, and who might have accompanied me through the process so that I didn't have to be alone with my fear and also my inexperience. Because inexperience is another thing. There are so many standards that we have for ourselves in business. When we have a business, like we're supposed to know what we're doing. But like, who of us knows what all we're doing? We know some things and not other things. And having somebody to support you, a mentor, can really make a difference as you use debt as a lever for the first time in your business. And having company also helps alleviate the shame, right? But that's further along. First, it's the emotional side of things so that then you can direct your resources more toward action. So a Canadian credit union in BC did a study very recently, like last year, I think in 2023, about financial shame in Canada. And they found that 75% of Canadians have financial worries, and 74% of them have money shame. So if that isn't enough for you to know, you're not alone. And that's the first thing that I would want folks to know. More than 1/3 of Canadians feel shame about their money stuff. Feeling shame about your money stuff is a human experience. It's not just you. And the second thing, as a result of that I hope that you would take in, is that there's nothing wrong with you. We're in this boat together, and financial shame is part of the human experience, part of the entrepreneurial experience. There's nothing wrong with you.